Have you ever poured all your time and energy into trying to help someone, only to watch them keep on choosing to do the very things that keep on hurting or hindering them? Either that, or they're just constantly miserable. They are always in a state of strain. So you sacrifice, you offer help, you fix up their messes, but nothing ever seems to work. They will not change, and they are never any happier. Every solution you offer only brings up more problems. So you might try to be creative and come up with easy, painless, effortless ways for them to try to help themselves, only to find there are more obstacles and issues arise. It's like they're in a constant state of misery, and yet you keep on trying. Well, in today's video, I'm going to be looking at those who get caught up in the rescue dilemma, why we cannot save someone who doesn't want to be saved, and what it costs whenever we keep on trying. But first of all, I'm not referring to those who genuinely do require levels of support from others, those who are genuinely appreciative. Nor am I talking about predatory types who lead others to believe that they are the only ones who can save them. I'm talking about those who exploit other people's good nature and drain them of all their time and energy. Those for whom every silver lining has a cloud, every goal has some kind of insurmountable obstacle, and every solution has a problem. So to begin with, why do we keep on jumping in with ideas and offers of help, even whenever experience and every rational part of us knows that nothing's ever worked up until now, and chances are it's not going to work this time either? Well, usually it's because of our compassion and our empathy. We generally don't like to see others, especially those we care about, in some kind of distress. Whenever we see someone we care about struggling somehow, we tend to think we have to do something, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. However, to some people, in particular vulnerable narcissists, well, victimhood tends to come with a sense that the normal rules don't apply to them. It's like they have a get out of jail free card whenever it comes to accountability and personal responsibility. Everyone else is responsible for making their lives better, making their lives easier. And manipulative people often hijack and utilize that caring part of us to their own advantage. In the early stages, whenever we meet, they tend to test us in little ways to see how flexible we are with our boundaries. How much are we willing to compromise ourselves to accommodate? And they often do this through problematizing even little innocuous day-to-day things. For instance, maybe we're not allowed to use certain words because that's far too triggering for them, or we're not to use a certain tone of voice because they're sensitive to aggression. But this quickly moves on to not expecting them to be on time or maybe carry out their promises because of their anxiety or whatever. And if they're claiming to have some kind of trauma or some kind of difficulty, well, most people do tend to be accommodating. After all, nobody wants to hurt someone who is already hurting. But what commonly happens is a piece at a time, people begin to betray themselves in order to keep the peace and to try to keep the other person happy. And eventually, the things that people do to help or accommodate just becomes the bare minimum, and it's expected. And after a while, people can find their sense of compassion can get tangled with other things such as duty. For instance, you have to do the things for me that I claim I can't, or I have no one else and you're supposed to care about me. But then there's also fear. People become terrified of what will happen if they don't step in and do something. For instance, there could be fear of what that person might do to themselves or others if they don't comply, if they don't give them what they want. There's also guilt. For instance, they said if I don't give them any money, they'll be made homeless and that will be all my fault for not helping them. Other times, the guilt could manifest as, if only I'd tried harder, because I have seen that side of them that is really happy, caring, and functional. And due to them having seen that side of them, well, even if it was just a performance, there are little glimmers of hope. There could even be promises of how this one last favour, this one last sacrifice, this one last complete lifestyle shift is the one that's really going to help them out and solve everything. And some people can cling to that like it's a lifeline. So why do some people fall into the traps of those who claim perpetual victimhood? Well, one reason could be what Melody Beattie described in her book CoDependent No More. And that's whenever we confuse love with pity. We confuse helping with enabling. And people can end up in what Beattie calls the caretaker trap. And that's believing someone else's problem is our problem to solve. That's when codependent people can lose themselves in the drama of another person's selfish and sometimes destructive behavior. And they abandon their own lives trying to take care of or fix someone else. It's like, if I bring out the best in you, you'll see the best in me. And although that rescue role does seem noble, caring, and decent for most people at first, eventually it isn't. It becomes more like caring for a parasite that just keeps on taking but gives nothing back in return. Then there's being conditioned. A little piece at a time, people can be led to believe that this is their role, this is their job. The manipulative person takes them through a process of intermittent reinforcement such as minor rejections, abandonments, exaggerated distress, as well as little breadcrumbs of reward, all the while making it more and more difficult for the victims to say no. But then there are also those who derive their worth from helping and trying to fix others, and this isn't always a conscious process. Some people may have grown up in chaotic homes where being the helper was how they got love or maybe a sense of safety. So they might have learned that I'm valuable whenever I'm needed. So they might have grown up as maybe the hero child, the one who keeps everything together. But this tends to stay with them into adulthood. Again, people like this are very easily exploited by vulnerable narcissistic types. But I think a good way to illustrate the rescuer dilemma is what Stephen Karpman described as the drama triangle back in 1968. And this is a simple and easy to understand concept. There are three roles on the triangle at each point. First of all, there's the victim. Now, this is a person who might be thinking, I'm innocent, or I'm helpless, or I can't change this. Then there's the persecutor. This is the critic, the person who blames others. I'm right, you're the problem. Lastly, there's the rescuer. This is the person who believes I am good, because after all, good people do good things. So they jump in with ideas, solutions, resources, and maybe, in some cases, lots of second chances. But the thing is, these rules are not fixed. They tend to rotate as we go round and round them in many of our interactions, sometimes even in a single conversation in our own head. For instance, you might try to rescue the victim, but nothing ever seems to work, nothing ever seems to change, so you tend to get frustrated and you flip into persecutor mode. You might start shouting at them that they're never happy with anything. The victim then flips into persecutor on you. They might claim that you're a bully, you're so controlling, and don't you understand about all their terrible issues? But then you find yourself feeling like the victim, because after all you were only trying to do was to help. Then guilt kicks in, so you slip back into rescuer mode, trying to make things better again. And round we go. Now, Karpman did show that in some cases, the rescuer can actually keep the victim dependent, because the victim never gets to experience the consequences of their choices. So, if you think about it, they're actually being enabled. But the rescuer gets a temporary hit of a sense of purpose and maybe feeling valued, which can be followed by resentment, because the victim isn't really learning anything and they just keep doing whatever it is they do. In other cases, the victim might keep the rescuer permanently in that role, trying to do all their work for them, and they become the persecutor whenever the rescuer feels drained, tired, stops caring, or maybe starts to withdraw. So what is the real cost of staying in the rescuer role long term? Well, first of all, one person gets to have control over the relationship, the dynamic, and they're being enabled to continue their behavior. For the other person, there's exhaustion, often leading to burnout. For one person, there's a sense of attention and entitlement, and that's being fed. For the other, there can be bitterness and resentment. There could be a slow burning anger that leaks out into things like sarcasm, passive aggressive remarks, sometimes even full blown rage. One person gets to feel special and superior. The other ends up feeling like a failure because nothing they ever do works. Long term, it can lead to stress-related illnesses, anxiety, depression, can even affect sleep patterns. Now the thing is, going back to the drama triangle, and I'm not trying to oversimplify things here, but quite commonly, in situations where someone continually plays the victim, well, they take no responsibility for themselves. It's up to others to fix them. And in some cases, The persecutor, well, they take no responsibility for themselves either. It's always someone else's fault. The rescuer, however, well, they tend to take responsibility for everyone. So in order to get off that triangle, you have to recognize you're on a triangle in the first place. Awareness is everything. And getting off that triangle doesn't mean by switching roles, but rather by refusing to play. We take responsibility for ourselves, and we allow others to take responsibility for themselves. And that could mean setting clear boundaries and managing other people's expectations of you. Now, it might feel like you're abandoning people. In fact, you might even be accused of not caring. But remember, recovery from being a rescuer isn't about not loving or not caring. It's about changing how you love and how you care. Remember, there's a difference between caring about and caring for. There's a difference between fixing, rescuing, and supporting and encouraging. There's a difference between enabling and empowering. Not only are you giving other people the responsibility and the dignity of their own choices, you're also giving yourself your life back. Because you cannot save people who do not want to be saved. Some people find that it works for them to stay as they are. It gives them attention, gives them a sense of control, and they feed off other people trying to fix and rescue them, which is why nothing is ever enough. But you can, however, save yourself. And in some cases, whenever you do that, it actually creates the exact space that other person needs to choose their own solutions. Other times, they might just move on to someone else to attach themselves to, because you're no longer of any value. Now, if there's anything I've missed, anything you might like to add, please feel free to use the comments section. As always, there are some interesting conversations start from these videos. But if you find this topic to be helpful, please consider subscribing. And until next time, thanks for watching.